TCU School of Art, Maui 132, and our wonderful celebration panel discussion of TCU's sesquicentennial. We're also celebrating 150 years, 150 artists, and some of those 150 artists are already here in the room, and I've seen some moving around the building, examining old haunts and looking for where they've scratched their name into the furniture. My name is Sarah Jane Parsons. I'm really delighted that we have this opportunity to spend some time together. It's been such an honor and a privilege to work on this exhibition and to bring people together in this way. So I hope that after the panel discussion you'll get to enjoy the exhibition and your reunions will continue in conversation. But for the next 45 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how testy things get. No, just kidding. I'm going to hand things over to the one and only Dr. Mark Thistlethwaite, your moderator. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. I thought we had 150 minutes, but actually, this is going to go really fast. I told each person they have about 6 minutes, which is probably about 150 words. So we'll have time after all the speakers have finished for them to kind of ask each other questions or perhaps remember something they had forgotten about that somebody mentioned. And then we'll open it to Q&A. The idea is to offer a diversity of perspectives on the TCU Studio Art program. And so we have a very diverse crowd, or panel. I will introduce each in turn. It's really great to look out and see so many familiar faces, older and wiser. I never went to a college reunion myself, so this is as close as I've come. Glad to see you all here. David Conn is going to speak first. David taught printmaking at TCU for 40 years. He's a recipient of a NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, individual fellowship for drawing, printmaking, and artist books, as well as a Ford Foundation fellowship. He's been recognized as a master printer by the Print Research Institute of North Texas. And he's shown his work in more than 100 exhibitions in the United States, Central and South America, Japan, England, and Europe. Actually, so many things could be said about David's success as a mentor and artist, but I wanted to particularly highlight a contribution germane to the celebration of TCU's history. And that was, David was in fact the chair of the Art and Art History program during its transition from being scattered on the many floors of Landreth Hall and also across campus in a very odd building called the Metal Gym before we moved into this building. And it was David who in fact shepherded us into the prize-winning architectural building that we find ourselves in today. So, David.
Well, actually, thank you, Mark. Actually, I said it was like the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. We were spread all over. I taught printmaking in the basement of Ed Landreth, which I believe now is the green room. They use the green room. Ceramics was over here, right about where we're sitting right now. Harry had a sculpture operation over on Greek Hills. Art history was in Ed Landreth in a small little room. And what else? Oh, yeah. So I was going to say art history. One of the things that happened to me was I came to TCU to fulfill two appointments were needed. They lost 2 tenure positions, one in art history and one in printmaking. So they hired me to come in and, of course, start the printmaking going, but also teach art history. So I taught 2 classes, one in the fall and one in the spring. Henry Hopkins taught another one. He was director at the Community Arts Center back there. That was the faculty at that time. We had 2 painters, 2 painters, Mark Trotter and Dick Lincoln. We had Harry Gefford did not teach sculpture. Now, we have other people in here that know a lot of the backstory of what was going on. He was art education. And interesting enough, from Harriet's appointment as a full-time tenure track position to Amanda, that's how long it was a lapse of time to get a full-time art history. Dick Chuck Eisling taught communication graphics, or maybe it was called graphic design. They kept on changing it from commercial art, and they kept on changing it to something else. Eventually, it's called communication graphics now. So, this is what else. I'd like to try and get a perspective on what can happen in 42 years. I retired, started in '69, retired in 2010. And of course, I've watched the university for over 50 years, seeing what's going on. My wife and I came over for an event. I couldn't find the building room. And I said, I swear it used to be over here. It was a parking lot. Now it's a building. I mean, there's so much construction in the last 42 years. And so I was thinking about my grandmother, and my grandmother listened to Charles Lindbergh, The Flight, in 27. And she sat by a radio. That was the form of communication that they had down at that time, that everybody was able to take part in, to listen to the radio. And then she lived long enough to see Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, Apollo 11, in 1969, the year I came to TCU. And she watched it on a black and white television. And they only had 3 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS. So what I'm saying, this is fairly primitive to a lot of people out there, that all this mass communication that has gone on, and all the development from that time when you only had a half-time ceramic person. Dick Lincoln also taught French. Yeah. And then,
He also coached tennis.
So eventually I was able to teach printmaking, but also I taught painting and I taught drawing and eventually color design. And then in 1970, Craig Felton came here. So he was a full-time art history professor, and then Mark came after that. So yeah, that's the early stages of what can happen in 42 or 50 years. Absolutely amazing. So you might think about where you were 40 years ago, but where were you 20 years ago? Where were you 5 years ago? And think about what has developed, what has occurred, not only in the art world, but also in the world in general. Because I think they're all connected. I always think that your art reflects the time. And so there's so much going on now that's probably being reflected, in art schools throughout the United States. So that's about all I have to say.
Thanks, David. Our next speaker is Devon Nowlin, who is a Fort Worth native who holds a BFA from the University of North Texas and an MFA from TCU. Primarily known for her figurative paintings, she's worked in a wide variety of media and is currently creating compositions in mosaic glass. Devon's art's been featured in exhibitions across Texas, and she's participated in research and exhibition opportunities in Scotland and Germany. Her public art works include a piece called Trailing the Trinity, which was commissioned by the Fort Worth Public Art Program for the Clear Fork Main Street Bridge. Since 2019, Devon has been collection manager at the Damon Carter Museum of American Art.
Thank you, Mark. I'm thinking about what David said about transitions. Since he was here, I wasn't here quite that long, but I saw through a lot of transitions. I started in the MFA program in 2009, assuming that I would go on to teach, and that I had a luxury of time spent here developing my painting and other craft and working towards a teaching track. I was I think specific to my experience here in that time was that I was among the last graduate students to work with Jim Woodson and Linda Guy and Susan Harrington and Ron Watson before they retired. And in addition, Mark and Fran. And in that 2 years as a graduate student, I really loved the international students that I worked with that were here. I really enjoyed taking them to the rodeo, for instance, and showing them some parts of Fort Worth. I remember some conflicts, but ultimately I remember being very well supported and feeling well cared for. After I graduated, I started adjunct teaching, and I graduated in 2011 and started adjuncting in the fall of 2011. And at that time, Sally Packard was the chair, and she called me and said, it looks like there's going to be an opening at the gallery. Did you apply? And I said yes. I was already sensing that the adjunct track was not for me, and that teaching maybe wasn't my full-time priority. So I took on the position of gallery manager for Fort Worth Contemporary Arts in Maui, and that was a position I was in for 5 years. And along those 5 years, I still taught, and I gained some experience in public art. A highlight of my role with the galleries, the one nugget, well, two nuggets are on my resume. Work with the permanent collection of TCU. I updated an inventory that had not been touched in 10 years. So I understand some of that work is continuing. I was interim curator for 1 year when Sarah Parsons arrived, and she and I developed a project with Jonathan Shipper in which I claim that we worked with the university's facilities department and risk management to make explosions occur in the gallery. So that's something I carry with me. I made explosions happen in the gallery. Yeah, so the time and in that experience, I learned a little bit of everything that's involved in gallery work and some of collection work that led me to the Amon Carter, where I am. I've been for 6.5 years. So I feel like that experience, it just builds on itself, and sometimes you don't know where it's going, but when you look back, you can kind of see how it all makes sense and it all lines up.
Thank you. Lillian Young is our next speaker. As an artist, she depicts forgotten or not well-known moments in historical Black experience, focusing on lesser-known Black leaders, stories, events, and objects. Her works make a connection to the social anxiety felt today from the rise in racism, loss of representation, and her own struggle to continue to fight for equity. Lillian's art has appeared in galleries across the United States and also at the Stellenbosch University Museum in South Africa. Lillian received her BFA from TCU and went on to get an MFA as well as a museum studies certification at Michigan State University. Currently, Lily is the family program coordinator at the Brooklyn Museum of Art.
So I came to TCU in 2014, and I originally was an art education major. I was very adamant I was going to be an art teacher. I like doing art. I didn't see myself as I didn't want to be a starving artist. I didn't see that was the life for me. But I knew I liked teaching, and I had been doing teaching at my local Montessori school since I was like 12. So I figured artistship would be the perfect job for me to do. And this program at TCU taught me a lot of things for my own pedagogy and being able to develop and articulate that to people, as well as just getting to take a plethora of different art classes. It's always fun for me to kind of amaze people when I'm like, oh yeah, I took bronze casting 1 year. And they're like, bronze casting? Oh, yes, those are fun. But I fell in love with painting, and originally I was an acrylic painter, and then because of Adam Funk, I became an oil painter, so I blame him for that. And I really enjoy getting to explore history, and being at TCU really pushed me to start looking into Black history. I originally was looking more at cartoons and comics, because those are another fan favorite of mine. But after Trayvon Martin happened and the Zimmerman was acquitted, I saw the connection of how it was very much like Emmett Till's story. And unfortunately, people around me didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't know who Emmett was. And I was like, I don't understand why we can't make these connections. So I made a painting. I think it's still in my parents' house, if I'm not mistaken. And that kind of skyrocketed me starting to use art to explore the Black history and these moments that I learned about from my parents or just from watching a TV show or a random podcast that I knew that others people didn't really know. I eventually did art education for like 4 years, and then I switched it to studio art in like the last 5 months before graduation with my parents' permission. I graduated in the fall of 2018 instead of in that spring semester, but I learned a lot from all of the classes that I took, and I was able to take all of this information of not only art making, but how to manage a classroom and how to encourage other people to make art to grad school, where I found out I knew more than most of my professors. So I was able to kind of bring those things into it, and I was interested in talking to Dr. Nanga about how we read bell hooks, and when I got to Michigan State, and we took a pedagogy class, and I had mentioned, I use bell hooks philosophies a lot in my work. No one knew what I was talking about, so I kind of went rogue in pedagogy and took over and made them read that. But having all of that information, I realized that everything that I got to do here at TCU, having a solo exhibition for my senior year, getting to study abroad, having the support of when I got to intern at the Smithsonian, and they were able to help me like pay for just the housing for that, which was a huge relief for me, really helped build not only my teaching style, but also my artistic career, and helped me really just dive into research with my artwork, as opposed to just kind of making it up off the top of my head and trying to figure out how to make a lot of these images, which we have no records of, or they were just destroyed, and trying to figure out how to reimagine those imagery in a way that makes sense to everybody. And even now at the Brooklyn Museum, I'm going through a lot of the art lessons I made while I was here at TCU and bringing them into the gallery space. And it's quite fun because my coworkers will be asking me, how do you do this? I go, 1 second, I know I have a lesson plan. And kind of give it to them to use. So yeah, it's kind of like the influence of TCU really did help shape and create the trajectory of where I am as like a museum educator. And it's great that TCU, when I realized I don't want to be a teacher in a classroom and wanted to do it more so in a museum, the school was more than happy to help me make that transition.
Bernardo Vallarino is a Colombian-American mixed media sculptor and installation artist who's interested in geopolitical issues of violence and human suffering. He earned his BFA in sculpture from TCU and then an MFA in sculpture from Texas Women's University. His art's been exhibited nationally and internationally, and in 2019, Bernardo was selected as a National Association of Latino Arts and Culturals Fellow. He's very active in community involvement. He serves on, or has served on the board of the Artes de la Rosa, and is currently the coordinator of the Fort Worth Art Collective, which encourages, promotes, and provides opportunities for artists. Bernardo.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's amazing to be here and to see so many familiar faces. And at the same time, it's extremely intimidating because normally I would be on the other side of this room. Now, I'm talking about 2000 to 2006 when I was here at TCU. And I think for any undergrad, the experience of college is something that we all kind of look forward to, at least the ones of us who look for a college experience, of course. Coming from Colombia, with family that had graduated from college in Colombia and then moving to the States to a completely different structure, you really don't know what you're coming into. But fate had it, which was really interesting, and it's still very much in the back of my mind. When I was just gotten here, I was in 7th grade. My teacher decided to do a field trip to TCU. And out of all the buildings in TCU, we came to see Maui. And I remember walking as a 7th grader into the sculpture studio and looking at the space and just being in awe of everything that's going there. Now, at that point, I was not thinking, oh, I'm going to be a sculptor. That really wasn't it. But I knew I wanted to be part of something like that. Just the energy that was there, the space, the smells, the textures, everything. I mean, I can still remember very much so walking through that space. So it was extremely fortuitous that when I did apply to TCU, right, as an immigrant, somebody who's struggled learning the language and so forth, I did manage to graduate early from high school, and I was glad to have been accepted here at TCU. Now, I did not know that TCU was going to take such a huge impact in my personal life. Originally, I wanted to do special events. That's really what I wanted to do. So my major was RTBF. And part of that is because growing up in Latin America in the 80s, when you say you are wanting to be an artist, that's also telling somebody that you're about to die, like you have a death. So it's not something that you just kind of mention up front, right? So here, when I decided to do special effects, it was a really good balance of a career that seemed to be pretty profitable on the eyes of cultural appropriateness, let's put it that way, right? And arts, aesthetics, and things that I connected with. And so I started doing my RTBF major classes and so forth. And at the same time, I thought, well, since I'm going to do sculptures and I was thinking animatronics and makeup and things like that, well, art is definitely makes total sense. It's a minor, and that's how I got into the classes at TCU in the arts department. And sooner or later, because of, once again, just God in general, things did not quite work out in the RTBF department. And then I realized that why would I want to tell somebody else's story when I could tell my own through my own, means? And art gave me that opportunity. The experiences that I had with many of you here, which I thank you all very much, David, Cam, Lori, I'm gonna cry. You guys gave me something that I take with me and I apply to my work and my day-to-day, literally every day. I really do. You guys changed my life in many different ways. If you look at my artwork, you see little bits of TCU through it. The passion in which I approach my artistic skill comes from the passion I saw my professors put on their own. The quality and the requirement of being, not a perfectionist, but being mindful of what you're doing comes from here. The historical content, a lot of the things. Everything, if you look at my artwork, you see the imprint of my undergrad experience at TCU. So, that's what TCU is for me. It's an extremely intricate part of everything that I do in my career, and I try to share as much as I can.
Thank you. Dan Jian, who has been a TCU assistant professor since 2019, is a visual artist who works across painting, drawing, and animation, which allows her to express her reflections on the changing spaces of landscape, narrative, and memory. Since coming to TCU, Dan's art has been seen in 4 solo exhibitions and 8 group shows. She's been very busy. She received her BFA from the Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia and her MFA from the Ohio State University, and has been awarded a number of artist residencies, including the Vermont Studio Center. Last year, Dan was named an Amon Carter Museum Community arts.
Thank you. First of all, I'm also grateful to be sitting here, and I'm particularly thankful now that I'm at the end of the table. So hearing everybody's speech really provide a perspective, and that's very much what I needed. Because I'm afraid what I share is a little bit darker. Because I was appointed at 2019, and 3 out of my 4-year appointment here is pandemic. And that's pretty much the majority of my time at TCU, and also this is my first full-time appointment for first professorship. So TCU is very special in this sense, and School of Art. In the sense that it's, prior to that I was teaching at Ohio State University, but just adjuncting, and really focusing on my own studio work. So TCU is special in the sense that this is where I see myself becoming an educator, hopefully the kind of educator that you're talking about. But also try and errors as well, because I see myself prior to this appointment is newly graduate artist who's trying to make it, and all that struggle and walking the journey that is not too far away from the kind of journey that everyone else, my students, undergrad and grad, are walking now. So that perspective is both, I guess, a privilege, but also a shortcoming. Depends on how you see it, if I make mistakes. With that being said, I think what I want to contribute to our panel discussion is some of the perspective in pandemic teaching, maybe, and also the perspective in navigating university space and instructor and classroom or life experience in general. So when I started in 2019, I started in the fall. In spring, pandemic hit, and for me it starts earlier because it was first in December, January, and the news were from Wuhan, China, which was my province. Not my hometown, but 2 hours away from my hometown. So that time frame was a little bit elongated in my reality. And then Sumi was in United States, so my time at Maudi was very quickly became interesting. My new appointment. I remember, for one thing, I remember talking to Director Ning. I was like, is my job still going to be here next year? And that unknown, doubling the new job at here. So figuring out, I felt like I'm almost as scrambling as my own students. With that being said, my classroom, just to paint a picture of a teaching day, I think fall 2020, it was, bear in mind that I teach drawing, and one of my classes is life study, and the studying of subject of human and life model is what we use, and imagine trying to teach that on Zoom. So I think that to paint a picture, you log on 5 o'clock, and you stare at 9 black boxes, and say, today we're going to study feet. And you go through demonstrations and slide, bone structure and everything, and you ask, am I clear? And 3 seconds later, a thumbs up. You try to say, it's okay, they're learning. I don't remember why, because I think it was part of the university's policy that you can't mandate they turn on the camera. For me, teaching has been a journey. That's the easiest one I can see. And that was those moments where I truly felt what Nietzsche has said, that when you when you're staring at those black boxes on Zoom, and that was where I recite his famous quote of, "When you gaze at Abby's, the Abby's gaze back at you." So, but I want to fast forward and return to the presence, because for me, especially after listening to what David shared with the long history of the TCU, and I realized 3 years is such a fracture of 150. And imagine that we will have many 150 years to come. So the continuity or the fragmental discouragement, such as our turbulent time now, it's really helpful to see that in the fluency of the history of the university, and helps me to see my position is always mostly about walking this journey along with my students, either graduate students, undergraduate students, even my peers. So the presence is what I strive for with the short time that I have. That the lesson that I've learned, and I imagine it's always going to be becoming of the educator and teacher and artist. So that's what I have to share.
Before we have some more comments, I want to congratulate the panel. It's one of the few times everyone has adhered to their time. Which rarely happens.
We have electric shocks on the.
Do you all have questions for each other, or comments, or any thoughts that have come up hearing what
Just
other
when I
people?
first met Bernardo, as a young man walks in, and it was in printmaking class, I believe. Or was it
Color design.
Color design.
One of the two.
But he walked in, and it rarely happens, so a student will walk in and say, "Hi, my name is Bernardo." Actually put his hand up. First of all, I thought, this is a mature young man. So I just wanted to point that out. Your first impression was very good, Bernardo.
So there's a different professor from a different school here that's my best friend, and he has a similar experience.
I'd be curious to hear from you all about what you see as advantages of the program at TCU, or what you found to be advantages of the program.
I mean, one thing for me, especially with coming from TCU and then going to like MSU, I remember when I was there, they were telling me like, everything's high tech, it's all new, And I was like, oh, that's cool. And some of the things at TCU they worked fine. They weren't like high tech and new, but they were kind of old. And then I got to MSU and I was like, oh, they lied. TCU was way better. Just in some things and even in our studio spaces. But one of the things that was really beneficial for TCU was like how close I became with a lot of my peers in classes. I still have a group chat with 2 of my friends from TCU, and we talk every day in that thing. But we have like just little sayings that we developed from here, or we have random memories pop up, and just like the community that TCU was able to build, especially with showing and introducing us to the art community of Fort Worth. Because especially when I explain it to people who are not from Texas, and even in like Michigan, they were very surprised that a small child from Texas actually like knew all these very fancy art things. And I was like, yeah, we have like world-class museums. So TCU was able to like help build that for me and show me like what a really cool art community can actually be, instead of like the usual snobby ones like they have in other places.
My first thought was the light in the second floor studios. It's really nice. Yeah.
Kevin Brooks should be delighted to hear that.
What we wanted was an art factory. Those of you who worked with, on this project, an art factory, and we got it across. It was basically, that's what we wanted, that beautiful light coming in.
And some of you may not know, but when we moved in the building, The entire second floor was an open space. And it was this ideal that there were no walls. You know, everything was fluid, everything was open. Just before the building opens, our son would come up and skateboard. But there were some accordion walls that after a semester or two started to close. And people, you know, it was still very interdisciplinary, but disciplines began to emerge in a certain way. It was interesting to track that kind of territorial change that took place over time. But it was this idea of this very fluid open space. And, you know, having a room like this that you originally had 14 projectors. You could project on the ceiling. Yeah.
Sistine Chapel.
That was Craig Felton's idea. And Craig left before we moved into the building and left us with 14 projectors to deal with.
And slides.
Yeah. And the two projectors that were on the floor that shot up to the ceiling, we had to use for about 10 seconds at a time because they would start to smoke. No ventilation. They had.
You ever push back the doors and leave it open? Upstairs?
Upstairs?
Yeah.
I
said people started closing the accordion doors.
The graduate students wanted their own spaces too. You know? So it's one thing to work in an open studio, to have your own confined space. So that was happening. But I mentioned the first time we had computers. Okay. I was chairman of the art department. And this is Tucker's time. I went through Maudie and Tucker and then Ferrari. Ferrari came in and realized Tucker was saving all this money for him to spend. And then we became, everybody got on the network. He came in with 2 computers. He had a PC and a Mac. All right, so I was talking to a student came back from a design interview. And she came back and she looked a little full on. I said, well, how did it go? And she said, well, it started off pretty well. And then they said, can you work a Mac? And she had no idea what they were talking about. And I thought, oh my God. So I went and took one of the utility closets upstairs on the second floor, and I got a Mac. And I had every graphic student go through it and take a look at it and just play with it, see what it's about. Because we were so far behind the game right here. We needed to get going because we see how fast things are moving. So I just want to say that's about computers on our campus. Now,
If you haven't been back to TCU for a while, and you were a student here, walk upstairs on the second floor, and the change is amazing. How it's different from what it was even 10 years ago, let alone 20 or so. Yeah.
Can I say that struggle with technology, not AI and ChatGPT, and we're just as confused. Well, I am just as confused about this room. I wonder if Nick is the only one who's catching up with current trend of technology.
You have a 13-year-old with you. So adopt a 13-year-old.
Always behind the curve.
You can create your lesson plans, just create lesson plans for. Yeah.
What questions do you all have?
I got a question for David. Maybe it's about the building. So what was the pitch to the powers that be at the time to get a new building? Because I know maybe about that time the endowment for TC wasn't that great.
Yeah, you got to remember that Tucker came in with a $50 million endowment, I think $56 million endowment, and turned it into a $500 million endowment. So what was happening was we had good connections with the museums, and one, Amon Carter, by the way, they resented this for about a year, and they're the ones who provided the funds, to do it. And one of the requirements was we weren't going to have a gallery. There's enough galleries, so we called it the somebody had this other funny name for it, you know. But eventually that dissolved after. I mean, we couldn't do anything to the property. We couldn't change anything for like 5, 10 years. We couldn't change the color of the paint. So, but that answers it. But it's Amy Carter. We got the Amy Carter.
Yeah, and specifically Ruth Carter Stevenson.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it still is. There's a plaque, but there used to be outside the room that no one ever looks at. Because this was called the Ruth Carter Stevenson Multimedia Room at one point. But she also stipulated she would give the money if they would let her choose the architect. Which is, and that it would be named for Maui. That was also part of her stipulation.
And who was it that went to them to kind of solicit the funds for it? Or, I mean, was it specifically what group of people from the university?
That I don't know.
I don't remember either.
Because at that time, the development office probably had 2 people in it. Seriously.
Yeah.
You know.
The way the university worked when I was involved as chair is you had people going out to look in the community, see what their interests are. And there was an interest there that she would give money, you know, but it would deny the Carter from buying anything for over a year or more because we took a hunk of that endowment and that's what she used to build this. So there was some displeasure with the historians and curators.
They made up for it. They're doing okay.
Yeah, they try to link, you know, somebody who's got the money with the cause. You know, so I don't know how it came about, but you know, somebody said, "Hey, let's use art." You know. I mean, we were all over the campus. I mean, we were spread like the 12 tribes.
You have to remember too, at that time, Fort Worth was literally half the size it is now. And you could very easily imagine at some cocktail party, somebody mentioned the arts at TCU to Ruth Carter Stevenson. You know, a conversation developing that way is very likely. TCU, when this building opened, had an enrollment of 5,000. So, you know, half the size it is now. Other questions?
Come on, Cam.
This is just like our class. Well, there are a lot of resources in this room for a history of TCU at various times. What I like about this panel, it's a nice snapshot of TCU right now. With the history, the diversity, you know, different interests and so forth. It's really quite striking, I think. Yes?
Some of y'all's adult education classes have been wonderful for those of us who didn't get to go to art school. Thank you for those.
Yes. Friendships. I'll point to one friendship that happened in my etching class, first fall of 1969. That was Mary McCleary met Ann Stopper, and they are devoted friends, and that continues to this day. So chatting, I figure it's going to go on for about 40 years.
Probably. I mean, we still talk like all the time,
Yeah.
and like when I was at MSU, Sydney couldn't, but like Maria flew out to see me for my show, for my MFA show. And then I flew to Buffalo and I had just gotten like a research thing to do research for said MFA show the year before. And I just kind of said, hey, you're going to be my travel assistant, which means I just pay for all your food. And he just went with us the East Coast. And it was really fun and it worked out pretty well. But yeah, a lot of the friendships that you make here at TCU, especially in the art department, they just kind of last for a long time, and it's not even just by like year. Like I have friends who graduated way before me or after me and stuff like that, and it's just really cool to get to see. Even now, some undergrads came to visit Brooklyn, so I got to give them like a little tour of the Brooklyn Museum, which was really fun, and it was interesting to get to see like the little groups that I remember my classes kind of being in, the graphic design students, maybe with all the graphic design students, or just all the different, like all the different mediums, I guess you could say, mixing together and observing the artwork that's on display, or just walking around New York and going on different adventures. So the friendships here are really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's hard to
Lillian,
leave.
we love you.
It's hard to leave. I remember after graduating from TCU, it was a true timing of mourning of like not being here all the time, because those friendships plus there's safety, was a sense of safety that I still miss, you know. When I got ready after 10 years to go back to grad school, there was no doubt about it. Just like get straight back to TCU and start asking our professors if I need help, you know, and to get warmed up back up, and taking classes again right before that kind of set me back, you know, into the path I'm right now. So, you know, it stays with you for a long, long, long time.
And I had a very extended grad experience because I went directly into working here for 5 years, and part of the gallery job was training and working for a year with new graduate student assistants. So when I was working here, Lillian was here, Bernardo was here, and then my grad school cohorts kind of extended for 7 years instead of just 2 years. I made a lot of friends, and yeah, that I still have today.
Yeah, and the professors are awesome professors too. like I always tell people my mentor is Adam Fung, and they're like, "What do you do?" It's like, he honestly made me start painting Black history, because he would go to the library and ask them to acquire Black artist books that we just didn't have, and those were really beneficial for me to just kind of look through what other people were doing. But even like taking sculpting classes, I try to always take like camps classes, because I'm not necessarily a sculptor, but I would be like, this is the artwork where I don't have to put a lot of emotional, like, trying to sort through my own self-history, and I can just have fun with it, which was very beneficial. And I still have a bunch of like little bronze castings that I made that I just kind of keep as paperweights in my studio. Or I have like cups that I made in Chris's ceramics class, and they're just kind of, I will be like, do you want the cool cup that I made or the one I bought? But yeah, the professors all like helped with those influences, especially with all the different things that they can teach you, or just helping you in life in general. When I was here, there was like a semester where I just, my job security went out the window with one phone call, and I just remember kind of having a panic attack in the middle of painting, because I was unsure how I was going to pay for anything. But I had told my professors, and they were like, well, you could try this, and we could do this, and trying to help me figure out how to navigate just being not really independent financially for a hot second. And eventually, I was fine, but it was nice to know I had the support of all the professors here.
Yeah, and it was always very relaxed. I mean, I was always afraid, because I've heard some horror stories about professors who they have this way of doing their artwork or their techniques, and you are kind of required to relearn those and apply them. And that was never, ever my experience here. You know, the skills were taught, they were given, they were provided to us, and then we were held hand. You know, our hands were held, but we grew in our own paths. You know. And the fact that what you do and what I do, you know, in our artwork is a big testament to that. Because I mean, I use the word sculptor, but really, my interdisciplinary goes all the way through, from video to audio to, you know, all kinds of media. So it's hard for me sometimes to say just this, and it comes from you know, the flexibility and the freedom that existed on thought, right? You know, the skills were given, but the thought is what was, you know, given prior to. So, and one of my favorite things to do, honestly, I'm gonna say, it's one of my favorite places to be is the furnace.
That was pretty cool.
You know, pouring metals is one of the funnest things ever to do. I love it. I'm not really a bronzecaster, but I wish I would, but it's one of my favorite things to do here.
It's really fun, and all the I always compare TCU, my experience here at TCU, to my experience at MSU. And when I went to MSU, I got in because of the artwork that I made here at TCU. But as soon as I started, my first semester was a bit rough, and that's because one of the things that was suggested was I don't use text anymore. And if you know my work, I use text a lot. I can't spell, but I love to. But yeah, it's very difficult. But a lot of the professors were like, "Oh, you don't need to use text, and you need to make it look more hyper-realistic or make it more abstract." Or they were trying to make me paint a Kehinde Wiley level painting, and I really hate painting that big. And honestly, going into the pandemic, while it did make me crazy, and I did have the abyss thing too, with my own teaching drawing classes, it allowed me just a chance to step back and go through my old sketchbooks and notebooks from my undergrad time and just realize I don't have to listen to these people that much and just kind of do what I was originally taught and remember all the encouraging things that I had from here and all those times to just develop my artwork and go back to my own style and not take on someone else's style because it's not who I was.
I don't know if they still offer this at TCU, but you could take a 1 hour, pay for 1 hour, and go to the painting class or sculpture class. And I was living in Fort Worth, I loved art, and I just started doing that. So I know a lot of the people here because I was here in the 90s even before I worked on an MFA. And we've lived in Fort Worth a long time, so I just knew the faculty and all that. And I had a degree, but not an art degree. And Ron Watson said, "Why don't you apply for an MFA?" And I said, "Well, I don't have an art degree." And he said, "We've got a portfolio." And that's, how I started. And I was certainly one of the older students, but I loved it.
And we're proud you applied.
I have a question. Bernardo and Devon, you're involved in a collective, and you were very much involved in a collective, Homecoming. Did those grow out of experiences at TCU? I know some of the people from TCU were in them. Is that something that was engendered by being at TCU?
In my case, yes, because I'll just say my cult leader arrived. So just a mix of personalities that came together that I think also maybe part of that security, of a place that we could take a lot of risks and try things that weren't necessarily happening here, but then Bradley moved here from New York where some things were happening that we here weren't aware of, and he said, "Hey, we could do this." And a big group of us said, "Yeah, let's do that." Yeah, so we worked together in about a 12-person operation for about 3 years, maybe almost 4 years. Oh, and all of us almost exclusively working, for the sake of this collective.
And what about your?
So the Fort Worth Art Collective, it came from the need, the want to have more critique, something that after you leave the classroom atmosphere, it's really hard to get good, true critique with a group of people that you trust and that you can be vulnerable with. It's really, really hard to do that. A lot of times as artists, we go out in public and show our artwork. However, the response from the public needs to be very washed down and always congratulatory, things like that, which we appreciate quite well. But we really also need the other side of the coin in order to grow. So finding that was the original need for creating a collective. And there's another artist in Fort Worth, Colombian artist, and we sat down together and said, how do we do this? And she reached out to Lillian Taylor, another curator from the Community Arts Center for a few years back, and she's the one that helped us coalesce a group of artists locally, and we had our show about 12 years ago. And since then, we're a true collective in the fact that we're not an organization, so we don't have any tax documents whatsoever. We're only a group of artists that work together to showcase artwork in different locations. And the idea is to build each other's skills and resumes in some way, especially for those who are just starting to come into the art world in Fort Worth. And another thing is, it came from a need as well, because in Fort Worth we're still needing spaces for artists to incubate locally. We still need a lot of that. We tend to export a lot of really good artists to other cities that have that already as part of the city. And Fort Worth, we still currently need that. And our collectives are a place where we can, from the grassroots ourselves, do and grow. So.
And can I make a plug for the Thursday evening meeting at the Arts Fort Worth?
Oh yeah, go to that.
Community Arts
Please
Center.
do.
I think it's from 6 to 7 this Thursday. The 1300 Gindi Task Force is a city-led task force to evaluate the future use of that building, which means, do we really need an art center? What else could this be? And it needs to be an art center for emerging artists. So
Definitely
anybody
go to that.
can go.
Please do. I mean, it is an absolute necessity. I mean, if we are truly proud of our Fort Worth arts, you have to be there.
Yeah.
Just for those of you who say at one point we love our arts in Fort Worth, you need to be there.
That center is like really beneficial for TCU students in general.
Yeah, it's big venue for us, for our students to apply for a first show.
Yeah, that's where I got one of my first shows, and like even this summer I have an exhibition there. So it's a great thing that TCU actually has like access to. I won't be here, but everybody else should go.
You can make a comment online.
And the second year MA students are curating a show of MFA students there this summer.
Awesome. Outstanding. And tomorrow's Spring Gallery Night in Fort Worth, Florida Spring Gallery Night. So great night to be out from noon to 9 all around Fort Worth. So check that out.
Parking flurry downtown after 6.
Any other questions? Yes.
Mark, where do you see, in the panel, where do you see TCU's goals or area for growth in art?
I'm sorry?
Where do you see TCU's growth, opportunity for growth or goals for art in the next, maybe not 150 years?
Well, why not? I don't know. I'm retired. No, I think one of the things that strikes me, and I was just going to say that I'm very heartened by, is TCU always stresses in so much when they talk about the school, a sense of community and so forth. And the word community has come up a whole lot on this panel, and I think all of you have participated in a variety of communities in important ways, and I think that will continue to be. I would never predict anything about art, actually. So, there'll be newer media, probably, as well as new media. There'll be all sorts of things that we don't know. But there'll always be artists who, have an imagination and can come up with things that, we would not expect to see or anticipate. So, my sense is if the kind of program that's been established continues, that it will certainly foster that kind of imaginative thinking, critical thinking as well. They go hand in glove. And so I think that's been a real strength of the program. I think this, looking back over the studio majors and also the art history majors, they've done very well for themselves in the real world. Getting art-related positions, and so it's very heartening. And I'm continually impressed in running these things. So the ability to adapt, I think, is something that is part of being an artist, and so that's going to serve the department well. Also, so that was pretty vague.
History reflecting not only one part, but all parts of that society at that time. What happened politically, what happened economically, socially. all of that was taken into consideration. And that's reflected through art.
Yeah, art's been around a long time. I think it's going to be around for a long time. And I'm grateful because I wouldn't have had a job. Well, thank you all so much for coming. The 150-year celebratory exhibition is now officially open. It's after 5 o'clock.